The Golden Age of the Clovis. Pioneers of a new world. 13 millennia ago, the Americas were a realm of giants, a cold, formidable landscape dominated by tusked Goliaths and ferocious predators. Into this world emerged a new kind of predator, armed not with tooth or claw, but with stick and stone. These were the Clovis people, an ingenious and adaptable culture whose deadly technology and rapid expansion allowed them to conquer a continent. Though their golden age was archaeologically brief, their legacy remains central to our understanding of the initial settlement of the Western Hemisphere. The mystery of origins and the peopling of the Americas. For much of the 20th century, the Clovis first hypothesis was the dominant scientific consensus, suggesting these people were the very first to enter the Americas roughly 13,000 years ago. However, recent discoveries of pre-Clovis sites have shifted this view. While some sites in Brazil and South Carolina suggest human presence as far back as 30,000 to 50,000 years ago, these remain controversial due to the primitive nature of the artifacts, which some argue are merely naturally broken rocks or the work of monkeys. The most compelling early evidence comes from White Sands National Park, where human footprints have been dated to between 21,000 and 23,000 years ago. Genetics further clarify this timeline, showing that the ancestors of Native Americans diverged from the Inuit around 17,000 years ago, followed by a massive 60-fold population boom between 16,000 and 13,000 years ago. This surge indicates a rapid expansion into new territories. While the dominant theory posits a migration from Northeast Asia across the Bering Land Bridge, Beringia, a landmass twice the size of Texas, researchers now favor the coastal migration hypothesis. This theory suggests that people traveled along the relatively ice-free Pacific coast using watercraft, allowing them to spread to South America much faster than an interior route through glacial corridors would permit. The revolutionary Clovis toolkit. The hallmark of this culture is the Clovis point, an expertly crafted fluted stone projectile. These points were not merely tools, but masterpieces of prehistoric engineering. Typically 4 to 5 inches long, though some, like the Roots Clovis, exceed 9 inches, they featured distinct flutes or grooves chipped out of the base. This fluting process was incredibly risky and often resulted in the point breaking during manufacture. However, the Clovis people accepted this risk because the flute served as structural shock absorbers, significantly increasing the point's longevity when it encountered the extreme stress of impact. Their technology also included atlatls, spear throwers. These allowed hunters to throw darts faster, farther, and with more power than hand-thrown spears, providing a safe distance from dangerous prey. Removable foreshafts. Hunters likely used a system where the stone point was attached to a bone or ivory foreshaft, which could be swapped out or used independently as a butchering tool. Bone and ivory tools. Clovis sites have yielded fine needles for tailored clothing and bi-beveled bone rods. Interestingly, these rods bear a striking resemblance to 27,000-year-old tools found at the Yana site in Siberia, providing a potential technological link to the Old World. Specialized hunters of the megafauna. The Clovis culture is inextricably linked to the exploitation of megafauna. Evidence from 17 kill sites shows they actively targeted mammoths, mastodons, gomphothers, and bison. Hunting a Colombian mammoth, which stood 13 feet tall and weighed 10 tons, was a monumental task. While some researchers debate whether Clovis points could reliably kill such massive animals, isotopic analysis of the Anzac 1 Clovis child confirms a diet that included mammoth meat. Hunting was a high-stakes endeavor, not just because of the prey, but because of the competition. A successful kill would attract the era's most terrifying carnivores, including the giant short-faced bear, which could weigh over 2,200 pounds, and various species of saber-toothed cats, like the Smilodon. The ability of the Clovis people to thrive amidst such competition is a testament to their social cohesion and technological prowess. Social structure and spiritual beliefs. The Clovis were likely a unified culture, or at least a unified technological tradition, maintained across vast distances. One of their most enigmatic practices was the creation of caches, collections of artifacts, sometimes numbering over 160 pieces buried in the earth. While some argue these were mere equipment stockpiles, many believe they were spiritual offerings, as some were buried in volcanic ash or covered in red ochre. Our deepest insight into their spiritual life comes from the burial of the Anzac I boy in Montana. Roughly 12,600 years ago, this 2-year-old child was buried with over 120 valuable artifacts, including Clovis points and bone rods, all covered in red ochre. This suggests a belief in an afterlife where the child might need tools to create a new life. DNA from this child has confirmed that the Clovis people are the direct ancestors of approximately 80% of all living Native Americans. The Great Disappearance. As abruptly as it appeared, the Clovis culture vanished around 12,750 years ago. This disappearance coincides with the Younger Dryas, a sudden cold shock that lasted 1,500 years, likely triggered by the draining of the massive glacial Lake Agassiz into the Atlantic Ocean. During this time, the mammoths and over a dozen other megafauna species went extinct. The cause of this extinction remains a subject of intense debate. The overkill hypothesis suggests that human hunting was the primary driver, while others point to the dramatic climate shifts of the Younger Dryas. It is probable that a combination of both climate stress and human pressure led to the end of the megafauna era. While the Clovis culture disappeared as a unified entity, the people themselves did not die out. Instead, they evolved into new regional subcultures, such as the Folsom tradition, continuing the human story in the Americas. In summary, the Clovis people were a revolutionary force. In just a few centuries, they mastered a new continent, developed sophisticated ballistics, and laid the genetic and cultural foundations for the indigenous civilizations that would follow. Their story remains a compelling testament to human ingenuity in the face of a changing world. Close your eyes. Let the heavy curtain of the present day fall away, dropping the digital noise and the hum of electricity, leaving only the quiet, rhythmic sound of your own breathing. Before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know your city and local time in the comments so we can see where everyone is listening from. Now, imagine the air shifting against your skin, becoming crisper, cleaner, carrying the scent of crushed pine needles and ancient, deep-frozen earth. We are drifting back, far back, past the rise of Rome, past the building of the pyramids, past the very first harvest of wheat in the Fertile Crescent. We are settling softly into the late Pleistocene, roughly 13,000 years ago. The world here is bigger, wilder, and wrapped in a coat of ice and silence. This is the stage upon which the Clovis people will soon dance their intricate, dangerous ballet of survival. To understand them, we must first understand the stage itself, a planet in the throes of a slow, thawing fever, yet still gripped by the icy knuckles of the last glacial maximum. Imagine standing on a ridge overlooking a landscape that no longer exists. To your north, the horizon is not land or sky, but a wall of white and blue, the Laurentide ice sheet. It is a continent of ice, 2 miles thick in places, a frozen monument so heavy it actually depresses the Earth's crust beneath it. It breathes a constant, chilled wind down into the valleys, a reminder that winter here is not just a season, but a geological epoch. If you think your heating bill is high in January, imagine needing to wear a literal bison to survive the Tuesday morning breeze. It puts things in perspective. But life here is not barren. We are standing on the edge of the Mammoth Steppe, a unique ecosystem that stretches like a golden ribbon across the top of the world, from Spain, across Siberia, and into Alaska. It is a dry, grassy tundra, teeming with life that thrives in the cold. The grass here is tall, nutrient-rich, and whispers secrets to the wind. The silence is vast, a physical weight that presses against your ears, broken only by the distant thunderous crack of a Calvian glacier or the trumpeting call of a creature so large it defies our modern comprehension. This is the realm of giants. It is a world waiting for a new kind of footprint. For generations, we told ourselves a simple story about how people arrived here, a single door opening in the ice. We imagined a narrow, adventurous path called the ice-free corridor, a gap between the Laurentide and Cordilleran ice sheets that opened up like the Red Sea, inviting intrepid hunters to walk from Alaska into the heart of North America. It was a romantic image, fur-clad families marching through a canyon of ice walls, spears in hand, walking toward the sunrise. But history, like the ice itself, is fluid and shifting. Historians still argue whether this corridor was truly a highway or a trap. Recent biological studies suggest that for thousands of years, this corridor might have been a biological wasteland, lacking the wood for fire or the game for food, making it a perilous, hungry route that no sensible nomad would choose. Perhaps the door was closed. Perhaps the first people did not walk through the center of the continent, but skirted its edges, hugging the coastline where the ocean offered a bounty of seals and kelp. But here, in the deep interior where the Clovis culture will eventually bloom, the land is still waiting. The anticipation is palpable. The sun hangs low in the sky, a pale, shivering disk accompanied by sundogs, phantom suns created by ice crystals suspended in the atmosphere, giving the heavens a mystical, trifold gaze. You can feel the vibration in the soles of your feet before you hear the sound. A rhythmic thumping that grows louder, shaking the dust from the sagebrush. A herd of bison, but not the bison you know. These are bison antiquus, larger, taller, with horns that span wide enough to impale a horse. They move like a dark river through the snow-dusted valley. Following them, hidden in the tall, dry grass, are the shadows of predators. The saber-toothed cats, the dire wolves, the short-faced bears. It is a biological arms race of size and power. And yet, the most dangerous thing in this landscape is about to arrive, and it is small, soft-skinned, and shivering. The Clovis people are coming. They are bringing with them a technology that will tip the scales of this ancient balance. They are carrying a stone that shines like a jewel and cuts like a razor. But before the first spear is thrown, before the first fire is lit in the shadow of the Rockies, we must appreciate the sheer bravery of this migration. To step into this world was to step off the map. There were no guidebooks, no grandfathers to tell you which berries were safe or which river led to the sea. Every horizon was a question mark. Every nightfall was a test of faith. As the sun dips below the jagged peaks of the glacial wall, painting the snow in hues of violet and bruised apricot, we settle into the rhythm of this ancient night. The stars emerge, brighter and more numerous than we have ever seen them, unpolluted by city lights, watching over a world on the brink of a golden, violent, beautiful dawn. We are here at the beginning of the story, waiting for the first characters to emerge from the mist. We leave the paralyzed silence of the interior ice sheet and drift westward, guided by the pull of the moon on the tides, until the air grows heavy with salt and moisture. Here, the world is not white, but a deep churning gray and a vibrant emerald green. We find ourselves hovering over the darker waters of the North Pacific, navigating the mists of the Kelp Highway. This is the leading edge of modern archaeological thought, a theory that has slowly eclipsed the old image of the trudging mammoth hunter. For decades, we believed the first Americans walked here, but now the ghosts of history are whispering that they may have paddled. Imagine the sound of water lapping against the taut, waterproof skin of a boat, a vessel stitched together from seal hides and driftwood, fragile as an eggshell against the vastness of the ocean, yet buoyant enough to carry the weight of human destiny. The fog here is thick, a cold blanket that muffles the world, turning the towering coastal glaciers into vague, looming shadows that groan as they calve icebergs into the sea. This is a dangerous coast, yes, but it is also a banquet. Beneath the surface of the water lies a dense, submerged forest of kelp, stretching from Japan, arching over the southern coast of the Bering Land Bridge, and cascading down the Pacific Northwest of the Americas. This kelp forest is more than just seaweed. It is a shock absorber that calms the violent ocean swells, creating a relatively safe channel for small craft to navigate. Inside this aquatic corridor, the ecosystem is exploding with life. While the interior of the continent is locked in a caloric austerity, the coast offers an all-you-can-eat buffet of sea urchins, shellfish, abalone, and sluggish rockfish that can be speared with ease. For a migrating family, this is the difference between starvation and abundance. Historians still argue whether this migration was a singular, purposeful dash south or a slow, meandering expansion that took thousands of years, a concept sometimes called the string of pearls model, where families would hop from one hospitable cove to the next, settling for a generation before curiosity or population pressure pushed them further down the line. It creates a scene of intimate, terrifying bravery. Entire clans, grandmothers holding infants, shivering under furs wet with spray, trusting their lives to the craftsmanship of a boat builder who learned the trade from his father, who learned it from his. If you think a family road trip in a minivan is a test of patience, imagine traversing the Pacific Rim in a boat the size of a couch with your in-laws and no GPS. It is a miracle the human race survived the social strain alone. Yet, they kept moving. The wind here smells of iodine and wet rock. We watch them pull their boats onto a gravel spit for the night, flipping the vessels over to create makeshift shelters against the relentless drizzle. The tragedy of this specific chapter of history, and the reason it remains so nebulous, is that the evidence has been stolen by the sea itself. At the end of the Ice Age, as the great glaciers melted, global sea levels rose by roughly 400 feet. The coastline these pioneers walked upon, the beaches where they built their first fires and buried their dead, are now miles offshore and hundreds of feet underwater. We are looking for needles in a haystack that has been submerged in an ocean. This is why the debate rages so fiercely. The kelp highway hypothesis makes perfect logical sense. It explains how people reached Monte Verde in southern Chile so quickly, essentially sprinting down the hemisphere faster than walking would permit. But the physical proof is largely drowned. We are left to read the shadows. We see the glint of obsidian tools found on islands that were never connected to the mainland, proving that these early people were capable mariners, comfortable on the water, not just land-bound hunters terrified of the waves. They were the Vikings of the Stone Age, masters of the liminal space between the solid earth and the fluid sea. As we drift further south along this phantom coastline, the ice begins to recede. The air warms, losing its biting metallic edge and softening into the temperate breath of the Pacific Northwest. The towering walls of white give way to massive stands of cedar and fir, trees that have stood for centuries, their roots gripping the rocky soil like arthritic fingers. Here, the pioneers might have paused. The urgency of the ice is gone. The rivers teem with salmon, a chaotic silver rush of life that returns every year like clockwork. One can imagine the relief of stepping out of a boat after weeks of cramping confinement, feeling the solid, unmoving earth beneath feet that have grown accustomed to the roll of the swell. They are no longer just travelers. They are becoming inhabitants. They are learning the language of this new land. They learn that the black bear is shy, but the grizzly is a king who does not share. They learn which roots will sweeten a stew and which will stop a heart. It is a process of rapid, high-stakes adaptation. But the coast is only the edge of the story. The continent is vast and its heart is calling. While some stay by the sea, becoming the ancestors of the great coastal nations, others turn their gaze inland. Perhaps they followed the great river arteries, the Columbia, the Fraser, upstream, chasing the salmon or the herds of elk. As they move away from the ocean, the sensory landscape shifts dramatically. The roar of the surf is replaced by the rustle of dry grass and the expansive silence of the high desert. The mist evaporates, revealing a sky so large and blue it feels like a hallucination. They are moving toward the site of a revelation, a place where the mud will capture their presence for 20 millennia. We are drifting now toward the American Southwest, specifically the Tularosa Basin in New Mexico. In the time we are observing, this is not the dry gypsum dune field we know today as White Sands. It is a lush, well-watered grassy plain surrounding the immense Lake Otero. The transition from the damp gray coast to this sun-drenched basin is a shock to the system. The light here is sharp and unforgiving. We hover low over the muddy banks of the lake. The reeds are tall and green, swaying in a warm breeze that carries the scent of sage and wet clay. It is here that the ghost of the pre-Clovis world becomes undeniably real. For years, skeptics dismissed the idea of people being here this early, but the mud of Lake Otero does not lie. We see them now, a group of teenagers perhaps, or a hunting party returning empty-handed, their laughter carrying over the water. They are walking through the soft, viscous muck of the lake edge. They are barefoot. We watch as a heel strikes the mud, the toes splay for grip, and the arch flexes to push off. It is a motion so universally human it hurts to watch. It is the same way we walk across a wet bathroom floor. These footprints will harden, be buried by sediment, and wait 23,000 years to tell us that the history books were wrong. These people are not Clovis. They are the phantom ancestors, the ones who came before the Golden Age, living in the shadow of the giants, quiet and persistent. They are the proof that the Americas were not an empty stage waiting for the Clovis actors, but a home already filled with stories, laughter, and the struggle for survival. As the sun sets over Lake Otero, casting long purple shadows across the mud, we realize we are walking on hallowed ground, layering our own invisible footsteps over theirs, preparing to witness the rise of the technology that will eventually overshadow them. We remain in the Tularosa Basin, standing on the edge of a memory that was buried for 23 millennia. To the modern eye, this place is White Sands National Park, a blindingly white expanse of gypsum dunes that look like snow in the middle of the desert. But if we close our eyes and let the timeline rewind, the dunes melt away. The white sand dissolves into the murky brown waters of Lake Otero. We are now standing on the prehistoric shoreline, the ground soft and yielding beneath our feet. This is where the ghosts speak. The park rangers and archaeologists here call them ghost tracks because they are elusive. They appear only when the ground moisture is perfect, revealing themselves as darker patches against the drying earth, only to vanish again when the sun climbs too high. It is as if the land itself is shy about revealing its secrets, granting us only fleeting glimpses of the people who called this place home long before history said they were allowed to exist. Let us follow a specific set of tracks, a story written in mud that has outlasted stone temples and iron crowns. We see the footprints of a young woman. We know she is young and likely small in stature from the size of her stride and the impression of her heel. She is walking with purpose, moving quickly across the muddy flats, perhaps trying to beat a coming storm or returning to camp before nightfall. But she is not alone. Every so often, her left side sinks a little deeper. The tracks show a slight asymmetry in her weight distribution. Then, the tracks change. She stops. There's a small, chaotic set of prints next to hers, tiny feet, clumsy and unsure. She was carrying a child. She set the toddler down, perhaps to adjust her grip or to rest her aching arms. And for a moment, the child toddled in the mud, leaving a record of prehistoric playfulness. Then, she picked the child up again, the extra weight registering once more in her step, and continued her journey into the twilight. It is a moment of profound, aching humanity. If you have ever carried a sleeping heavy child from the car to the bed, trying not to wake them while your back protests, you have walked in her footsteps. It bridges the gap of 23,000 years in a heartbeat. These are not specimens or migration units. They are parents, tired and loving, doing what parents have always done. But this domestic scene plays out on a stage of monsters. Not far from where the woman walked, we find another set of tracks, massive and kidney bean-shaped, deeply depressed into the earth. These belong to the giant ground sloth, a creature that looks like a hamster reimagined by a mad scientist who had a surplus of shag carpet and steroids. Standing 10 feet tall on its hind legs and weighing over a ton, it is a formidable beast with claws the size of butcher knives. In a fascinating twist of forensic archaeology, we can see human tracks actually stepping inside the sloth tracks. This is not a coincidence. It is a hunt, or perhaps a game of high-stakes tag. The humans were stalking the sloth, matching its movements, using its own footsteps to mask their approach. The sloth, sensing something, rose up on its hind legs. We can see the knuckles of its front paws touching the ground as it pivoted to scan the horizon, before dropping back down and hurrying away. It creates a palpable tension in the air, a silent movie of predator and prey where the roles are fluid. We realize that these pre-Clovis people were not just surviving. They were engaging with the megafauna, navigating a world where a wrong step meant death, armed with tools we have yet to fully find. The significance of these footprints cannot be overstated. For decades, the Clovis First Police, a figurative group of strict academics, demanded hard evidence to break the 13,000-year barrier. They wanted stones, bones, and stratigraphy. The footprints at White Sands provided something better, absolute certainty in time. Radiocarbon dating of common ditchgrass seeds found embedded in the layers between the footprints anchored these tracks to between 21,000 and 23,000 years ago. This was during the height of the last glacial maximum, a time when the ice sheets were at their absolute thickest, effectively sealing off the interior of North America from the north. This means these people did not just arrive. They had been here for a long time, or they arrived via a route we have yet to fully understand, perhaps the earliest waves of that coastal migration we witnessed earlier. They were the pioneers of the pioneers, living in the Americas for thousands of years before the Clovis culture was even a spark in an inventor's mind. Yet, there is a melancholy to these tracks. We see their feet, but we do not see their faces. We do not find their grand weapons or their permanent villages. They seem to have lived lightly on the land, like guests who were careful not to leave a mess. Historians still argue about who they were. Were they a failed migration, a genetic dead end that vanished before the ancestors of modern Native Americans arrived? Or are they the deep roots of the family tree, their bloodlines mingling and persisting into the present day? The genetics suggest a population bottleneck, a time when the numbers dropped drastically, and perhaps these footprint makers were part of that dwindling few, struggling against the harshness of the Ice Age. The silence they left behind is loud. They had no Clovis points, no distinct stone technology that spread across the continent like a brand name. They were localized, quiet, and deeply integrated into their specific environments. They were the ghosts in the machine of history, proving that the story of the Americas is longer, deeper, and more complex than we ever dared to dream. As the sun begins to set over the ancient Lake Otero, the mud begins to cool. The giant sloth lumbers off towards the tree line, its shaggy coat blending with the shadows. The woman and her child reach the safety of their fire, the smoke curling up into a sky dominated by unfamiliar constellations. We leave them there, safe for one more night. But the winds of change are blowing. To the north, the great ice sheets are beginning to groan and crack. The climate is starting to shift, warming and drying, turning the lush lakes into the dust bowls of the future. The animals are changing, and to survive, the humans must change too. They need a new edge. They need an invention that will allow them to stop stalking in the shadows and start dominating the open plains. The age of the ghost tracks is ending. The age of the stone masters is about to begin. We drift away from the Tularosa Basin, moving forward in time, speeding up the clock as the millennia blur. The grass turns brown, the lake recedes, and the mud hardens into stone. We are moving toward a flicker of orange light in the darkness, the glow of a different kind of fire, where a pair of hands is about to make a decision that will alter the course of predator dynamics forever. We are going to watch the birth of a weapon that is also a work of art. We settle into the warmth of the firelight, shrinking our world down to a single intimate circle of illumination. The vast, freezing winds of the tundra howl outside, but here, in the lee of a rock shelter, the air is still and smells of burning juniper and the metallic gunpowder scent of crushed stone. We are witnessing a moment of creation that balances on a razor's edge between genius and heartbreak. We are watching the birth of the Clovis point, the piece of technology that will define this era. In the hands of the man sitting cross-legged on a bison robe, a rough nodule of stone is being transformed. He's not merely making a weapon, he's crafting a masterpiece of prehistoric engineering. If the footprints in the mud were the accidental diary of a people, this stone point is their deliberate manifesto. The craftsman holds a piece of Edwards Plateau shirt, a stone traveled over hundreds of miles to be here. It is a creamy, translucent gray, prized for the way it fractures with predictable, glass-like precision. He has already spent hours on this single piece, using a hammerstone to rough out the shape and an antler billet to thin the edges. It is a rhythmic, percussive process. Click, snap, grind, click. With every strike, he reads the stone, looking for imperfections, calculating the angles of force. It is a game of three-dimensional chess played with geology. The point is currently a biface, a leaf-shaped blade about 5 inches long, sharp enough to shave with, deadly enough to kill. In any other time, in any other culture, it would be finished. But this is the Clovis era, and they demand something more. They demand the flute. This is the Clovis gamble. The man prepares for the final critical step. He abrades the base of the point, grinding it against a coarse sandstone to create a sturdy platform. He positions a punch made of antler against this base, angling it with the precision of a diamond cutter. The goal is to drive a single long flake off the bottom of the point, traveling up the center of the blade like a zipper, removing a channel of stone. This is the flute. It is incredibly difficult to execute. If he hits it too hard, the point will shatter in half, ruining hours of work and wasting a valuable piece of stone. If he hits it too soft, the flake will terminate early, leaving a lump that makes the point useless. It is the prehistoric equivalent of trying to update your computer's operating system during a thunderstorm. The chance of bricking the device is terrifyingly high. Yet, he takes the risk. He takes a breath, holds it, and strikes. Crack! The sound is sharp and clean. A long, thin flake of stone detaches, flying off to join the pile of debris, the débitage, at his feet. He turns the point over and repeats the process on the other side. The result is a perfect concave groove on both faces of the base. It is beautiful, yes, giving the point a sleek aerodynamic look, but the Clovis people were practical pragmatists, not just aesthetes. Historians and archaeologists have spent decades arguing over why they did this. Why risk breaking your best weapon right at the finish line? The consensus today points to structural engineering. This flute acts as a shock absorber. When this point is lashed to a spear and slammed into the tough hide and ribcage of a mammoth, the impact forces are tremendous. A solid base might snap the stone or split the wooden shaft. The fluted channel allows the point to slide seamlessly into a notched foreshaft, creating a connection that can withstand the violent compression of the strike. It is a modular design, intended for high-impact durability. He holds the finished point up to the firelight. It glows, translucent at the edges, the flutes creating a distinct shadow in the center. It is deadly perfection. This specific style of point is so effective, so revolutionary, that it will spread across the North American continent with lightning speed. We find these points from Washington State to Florida, from Mexico to Nova Scotia. It is the first widespread American style, a shared technological language that linked widely scattered groups of people. Finding a Clovis point in a cornfield today is like finding a Ferrari key in a Roman ruin. It speaks of a specific, high-performance moment in time. Some of these points, like the ones found in the root site, are over 9 inches long, far too large to be practical projectiles. These were likely display points, ceremonial objects meant to show off the skill of the napper, perhaps used in rituals or trade. It seems that even 13,000 years ago, humans felt the need to have the Pro Max version of their favorite tool, just to show the neighbors they could afford it. But the point in our craftsman's hand is not for show. It is for survival. He runs his thumb along the edge, carefully, for it is sharper than a surgical scalpel. He checks the symmetry. He's satisfied. But a stone point, no matter how sharp, is useless on its own. It is just a rock. To become a predator, it needs a delivery system. It needs to be married to wood, bone, and sinew. The craftsman sets the point down and reaches for a long, straight rod of mammoth ivory. We are seeing the second half of the equation now. The Clovis people did not just throw rocks, they built complex ballistic systems. He begins to fit the stone point into the foreshaft, a shorter piece of bone that will slot into the main spear. This is the reloadable cartridge of the Ice Age. If the spear hits a bison and the shaft breaks, the hunter doesn't lose the whole weapon. He simply pops in a new foreshaft with a fresh point, and he is ready to fire again in seconds. As the fire burns down to embers, casting long, dancing shadows against the cave wall, we see the pile of finished points growing. 5, 6, 7, a lethal arsenal. The amount of knowledge required to do this, to know which rock to pick, how to heat treat it to make it flaky, how to strike it, how to haft it, is staggering. We often make the mistake of thinking of cavemen as simple or primitive. But if you were dropped into this cave tonight, with your PhD and your smartphone, you would likely freeze or starve, while this man could turn a stone into a survival kit in 20 minutes. His brain is identical to yours. It is just running different software. He's a master of his environment. The wind shifts outside, carrying the distant, lonely howl of a wolf pack. The craftsman looks up, his eyes reflecting the dying light. He knows they are out there. He knows the competition is fierce, but he is not afraid. He touches the smooth, fluted groove of the stone point one last time. He is ready. The stone that risked everything has paid off. It is strong, it is sharp, and tomorrow it will fly. We watch as he wraps the finished points in a piece of soft buckskin, tucking them away like precious jewels. The night deepens, the cold presses in, but the fire of human ingenuity burns hot in the center of the dark. We are done with the making. Now we must turn to the using. We must leave the safety of the cave and step out into the open, where the grass is tall and the targets are moving. We need to understand how a human arm, weak and slow compared to a bear's swipe, can generate the force of a falling anvil. We are about to witness the physics of the kill. The sun climbs higher, burning off the morning mist and revealing the vast, terrifying openness of the steppe. Here, there are no cave walls to hide behind, no trees to climb in a panic. Out here, a human being is biologically embarrassing. We are slow, bipedal, soft-skinned, and devoid of fangs. In the eyes of a saber-toothed cat, we look less like an apex predator and more like a slow-moving protein shake. To survive in this arena, the Clovis people could not rely on muscle. They had to rely on leverage. We watch the hunter step forward, holding the weapon that bridges the gap between extinction and dominance. In his right hand, he holds not just a spear, but a system. The spear itself, or more accurately, the dart, is long, perhaps 6 or 7 feet, made of sapling wood that has been straightened over a fire until it is true. It is tipped with that masterpiece of stone we just saw created. But the secret weapon is in his other hand. It is a piece of wood about 2 feet long, carved with a hook at the end and a loop for his fingers at the base. This is the atlatl. To the uninitiated eye, the atlatl looks like a glorified stick. To a physicist, it is a lever of the 3rd class, a piece of genius that effectively adds an extra joint to the human arm, lengthening the limb and multiplying the speed of the throw. It is the prehistoric equivalent of the plastic ball throwers dog owners use in parks today. If you have ever seen how effortlessly those plastic arms launch a tennis ball across a field, you understand the mechanics of the Ice Age. Without the atlatl, a strong human can throw a spear maybe 30 or 40 yards with decent accuracy, but the projectile moves relatively slowly. With the atlatl, that same human can launch a flexible dart at speeds exceeding 90 miles per hour, covering distances of over 100 yards with force enough to puncture the hide of a bison and shatter the rib beneath. It transforms the hunter from a close-range poker into a long-range artillery unit. We watch the hunter practice. He is calibrating his body to the tool. He slots the cup of the dart into the hook of the atlatl. He raises his arm, elbow bent, the dart resting parallel to his ear. He takes a step, his body coiling like a spring, and then he snaps his wrist forward. The motion is fluid, a whip crack of energy transferring from shoulder to elbow, to wrist, to atlatl, to dart, thwip. The sound is a sharp hiss as the dart tears through the air, but look closely at the projectile in flight. It does not fly stiff and straight like a steel rod. It bends, it oscillates. The force of the launch is so immense that the wooden shaft bows under the pressure, storing elastic potential energy like a drawn bowstring. As it leaves the hook, it springs back, kicking off against the atlatl and propelling itself forward with added violence. This phenomenon, known to modern archers as the archer's paradox, allows the dart to stabilize in mid-air, spinning slightly due to the fletching, feathers glued to the back end, drilling through the wind toward its target. The engineering brilliance does not stop at the launch, it extends to the impact. This brings us back to the removable foreshaft we saw earlier, a component that historians and experimental archaeologists argue was the key to the Clovis hunting strategy. Imagine the scenario. You have successfully stalked a mammoth. You throw your dart. It strikes home, burying deep into the flank. The mammoth, understandably displeased, thrashes and takes off running. If your stone point were glued directly to the main 6-foot shaft, the thrashing animal would snap the long wood against a tree or simply shake it loose, destroying your weapon and potentially leaving the wound superficial. But with the Clovis system, the connection is designed to fail in a good way. Upon impact, the main shaft, the long, valuable, straightened piece of wood, detaches from the foreshaft. The stone point and the short bone foreshaft stay buried deep in the animal, continuing to cut and bleed, while the long shaft falls to the ground unharmed. The hunter can then sprint forward, scoop up his main shaft, pull a fresh preloaded foreshaft from his belt, slot it in, and he is fully reloaded. It is the Stone Age equivalent of changing a magazine in a rifle. This rapid-fire capability was essential. You do not kill a 10-ton animal with one poke. You kill it by turning it into a pincushion, bleeding it out while staying out of range of its tusks. This technology suggests a tactical mindset that is far removed from the brute force stereotype. These were ballistic scientists. They understood drag, they understood center of mass, and they understood material fatigue. They accepted the risk of the complex fluting process because it allowed this modular system to work perfectly. The flute created a flat, thin profile that slid seamlessly into the split bone of the foreshaft, secured with pine pitch and sinew, creating a bond that was strong against compression but released when twisted or shaken. There is a tactile beauty to the gear as the hunter inspects it. The atlatl itself is polished smooth by years of handling, perhaps carved with the totem of his clan, a raven or a wolf, to grant it spiritual guidance. The finger loops are soft leather, worn to the shape of his grip. It is an extension of his body. We can imagine the feeling of confidence it brings. Standing on the open plain without it, he is prey. With it, he is the most dangerous thing on the continent. Historians still debate the stopping power of these weapons against the largest megafauna. Some argue that the skin of a mature mammoth was simply too thick, perhaps an inch of tough hide followed by inches of fat, acting like organic Kevlar. They suggest that Clovis hunters primarily targeted juveniles or sick individuals, or that they utilized bog traps to immobilize the giants before moving in. But experimental archaeology tells a frighteningly impressive story. Modern replicas of Clovis points, thrown with atlatls against fresh elephant carcasses, ethically sourced from natural deaths, have been shown to penetrate completely through the rib cage and into the vital organs. The stone point does not just pierce, it slices, creating a massive wound channel that causes rapid blood pressure loss. The hunter creates a mock target, a bundle of dried grass and hide propped up against a shrub. He moves back, pacing off the distance, 20 yards, 30, 40. He turns, sets his feet, and throws. The motion is silent, almost casual, but the result is violent. The dart slams into the target with a thud that can be felt in the chest, penetrating deep, the feathers vibrating from the sudden stop. He nods. He is ready. The sun is now high, casting short, sharp shadows. The wind has picked up, carrying the scent of something musky and ancient from the valley below. The testing is over. The engineering has been proven. Now, the theory must be put into practice. The tools are lifeless objects until they are animated by human courage. We drift closer to him, sensing the shift in his demeanor. The playful experimentation is gone, replaced by a cold, focused predator's intent. He signals to the others, a group of shadows waiting in the tall grass. They gather their bundles of darts. They check their foreshafts. They move out, not in a chaotic mob, but in a formation as disciplined as a wolf pack. We follow them, moving downwind, as the ground begins to tremble with a rhythmic, heavy bass note that vibrates in our very teeth. The giants are near. We move now into the long shadows of the late afternoon, leaving the practice field for the killing field. The transition is marked not by a signpost, but by a frequency, a low-frequency vibration that travels through the soles of the muklux and resonates in the hollow of the stomach. It is the seismic signature of the Columbian mammoth. We are entering the presence of royalty. While the woolly mammoth is the poster child of the Ice Age, shaggy and brooding in the frozen north, the Columbian mammoth is the true emperor of the temperate plains. It is larger, standing 13 feet at the shoulder and weighing nearly 10 tons, roughly the weight of a school bus, but with a much nastier temper and significantly better memory. To hunt this creature is not merely a physical challenge, it is a psychological siege. We find ourselves crouching in a dense thicket of willow and tall ryegrass, downwind from a watering hole in the San Pedro Valley of modern-day Arizona. The air here is thick, humid, and heavy with the smell of wet mud and the overwhelming, sweet musk scent of the herd. There are 6 of them, a matriarchal family unit. They are stripping bark from the trees with trunks as thick as tree trunks themselves. They're chewing loud and rhythmic, like the grinding of millstones. The sheer scale of them is disorienting. When a human stands next to a Columbian mammoth, looking up, they are not looking at an animal. They are looking at a landscape of gray, wrinkled skin. The tusks are spiraling monoliths, curving inward, some reaching lengths of 16 feet. These are not just weapons, they are snowplows, tree fellers, and status symbols. If you have ever felt intimidated by a bouncer at a club, imagine that bouncer is 2 stories tall and has 2 Cadillac bumpers attached to his face. You begin to understand the adrenaline cocktail flooding the hunter's veins. The hunters are ghosts in the grass. We see them signaling to one another with subtle hand movements, a flick of a finger, a clenched fist. They have covered their bodies in mud and crushed sage to mask their scent, blending into the earth tones of the steppe. This is not a chaotic brawl, it is a calculated assassination. They are watching the herd looking for a weakness. They bypass the matriarch, a massive, scarred female who radiates authority. To attack her would be suicide. She would defend her family with the fury of a hurricane. They bypass the smallest calf, protected in the center of the group. Their eyes settle on a young bull, slightly separated from the others, lingering at the water's edge. He is healthy, strong, and massive, but he is distracted, playing with a floating log, tossing it into the air with his trunk. He is the target. It is worth pausing to appreciate the audacity of this moment. Historians and paleontologists have long argued over the active hunting versus scavenging debate. For years, some scholars suggested that Clovis people were simply opportunistic scavengers, harvesting meat from animals that had already died of natural causes or became stuck in mud. It seemed implausible that men with sticks could take down a healthy leviathan, but the evidence at sites like Naco and Lenner tells a different story. At Naco, archaeologists found a mammoth skeleton with 8 Clovis points lodged in its body, one at the base of the skull, others near the shoulder blade and ribs. This was not a creature that died of old age. It was a creature that was executed by a firing squad. The placement of the points suggests a coordinated volley, a simultaneous strike from multiple angles designed to confuse and overwhelm the animal's nervous system. These people were not waiting for handouts from nature. They were taking what they needed. The hunters inch closer. We can hear the heavy, wet sound of the mammoth's breathing, a slow, tidal intake of air. We can hear the gurgle of its massive digestive tract, a biological engine processing hundreds of pounds of vegetation. It is a sensory intimacy that is terrifying. To get within throwing range, 15 to 20 yards, the hunters must invade the animal's personal space. They must enter the circle of death, the radius within which the mammoth can close the distance in 2 strides. Every instinct in the human brain screams to run, to climb, to hide. The amygdala is firing panic signals like a distress flare, but the hunters override it. They are driven by a hunger that is bigger than fear and a cultural confidence that tells them they are the masters of this world. They breathe in sync with the wind, moving only when the mammoth moves, freezing when it stops. It is a high-stakes game of red light, green light, where the penalty for losing is being trampled into a paste. The terrain here is crucial. The hunters have maneuvered the herd towards a bottleneck, a muddy arroyo, a dry creek bed with steep banks. This is the trap. If they can startle the animals, the herd might panic and run, but the steep walls will slow them down, separating the target from the protectors. We see the hunt master, an older man with gray in his hair and a face weathered like old leather, checking the wind one last time. He holds a small pinch of cattail fluff in his hand and releases it. It drifts steadily away from the herd. The wind holds. The trap is set. He looks at his team, young men, eyes wide but hands steady, gripping their atlatls until their knuckles are white. They are about to poke the dragon. There is a profound silence that falls over the scene right before the violence begins. The birds seem to stop singing. The wind seems to hold its breath. In this pause, we feel a strange empathy for the mammoth. He is magnificent, a pinnacle of evolution, perfectly adapted to his world. He has no natural predators, except for this strange, hairless ape that has just arrived from the north. He does not know that his reign is ending. He does not know that the sharp sting he is about to feel is the opening note of an extinction song. He splashes water over his back, enjoying the cool relief from the afternoon sun, unaware that he is standing in the crosshairs of history. Scholars often discuss the Blitzkrieg hypothesis, the idea that humans swept across the Americas, killing megafauna so fast the animals never had time to evolve a fear response. Looking at this young bull, comfortable and unbothered, it feels plausible. He ignores a rustle in the grass, assuming it is a coyote or a harmless rabbit. He does not understand the concept of a projectile. He lives in a world of tooth and claw, where danger has to touch you to hurt you. He has no concept of death that comes flying through the air. This naivety is his greatest vulnerability. The Clovis people are exploiting a gap in the evolutionary playbook. The huntmaster raises his atlatl. The motion is slow, deliberate. The others follow suit, raising their weapons in a silent salute to the gravity of what they are about to do. The tension is pulled taut, vibrating like a bowstring. We can see the muscles in the master's arm tense, the veins standing out like cords. He is waiting for the bull to turn, to expose the soft skin behind the front leg, the gateway to the heart and lungs. The mammoth shifts, turning broadside to investigate a noise. The heavy foreleg steps forward. The ribs are exposed. The target is painted. The master's eyes narrow. The world shrinks down to the tip of his stone point. The signal is given, not a shout, but a sharp, sudden exhale. The silence shatters not with a roar, but with a hiss, the collective exhalation of 6 darts slicing through the dry air. It is a sound like tearing silk. In the fraction of a second it takes for the projectiles to cross the 20-yard gap, the world seems to hang in suspension. We see the fletching spin blurring into gray streaks against the blue sky. Then, the physics of the Clovis point meets the biology of the Columbian mammoth. Thud, thud, crack, thud. The impacts are sickeningly solid. We witness the terrifying effectiveness of the technology we watch being born by the fire. 2 darts miss, skittering harmlessly into the dirt or glancing off the thick shoulder bone. But 4 find their mark. 1 strikes the flank, another the heavy muscle of the thigh. The 3rd and 4th are the kill shots, burying themselves deep behind the foreleg, punching through the inch-thick hide, sliding between the ribs and piercing the pleural cavity. The fluted points do exactly what they were designed to do. They hold fast. The sudden deceleration sends a shockwave through the wooden shafts, and as the mammoth violently flinches, the main shafts snap free from the foreshafts, falling to the grass like discarded toys. For a heartbeat, the bull stands frozen, his brain struggling to process the sudden, sharp agony blooming in his chest. Then, the pain transforms into panic. He trumpets. a sound so loud it is not heard so much as felt, a resonant blast that rattles the fluid in our inner ears and sends a primal shiver down the spine. It is the sound of a mountain screaming. The tranquility of the afternoon detonates into chaos. The matriarch spins, her tusks slashing the air, searching for the invisible enemy. The ground erupts in dust as 40 tons of startled megafauna scramble for traction. This is the dance of the hunt, and it is a chaotic, terrified ballet. The hunters do not stand and admire their work. They scatter like quail. This is the most dangerous moment. A wounded mammoth is not a cow. It is a siege engine of rage. The bull spots movement, a hunter scrambling up the steep bank of the arroyo. With a surprising fluid agility, the giant lunges. We feel the wind of his passing, the smell of dust and fear. He slams his tusks into the mud bank, missing the hunter's heel by inches, sending a shower of earth and rocks cascading down. The hunter rolls, regaining his feet and sprinting for the tree line. The bull turns to follow, but the pain in his chest catches him. He stumbles. The foreshafts are doing their grim work, cutting deeper with every movement, acting as internal razors. Here, we see the strategic brilliance of the bottleneck. The rest of the herd, panicked by the smell of blood and the chaos, is jamming into the narrow exit of the creek bed. They are blocking each other, creating a wall of gray confusion. The matriarch tries to rally them, pushing a calf forward with her trunk, but they cannot turn back to help the fallen bull. The hunters have successfully isolated their target. They regroup at a safe distance, watching from the ridge. They are not celebrating yet. They are breathing hard, their hands shaking as the adrenaline dumps into their systems. It is a stark reminder of their vulnerability. One slip, one stumble, and they would have been nothing more than a wet stain on the canyon floor. The bull is now alone in the arroyo. He is bleeding, a dark, rhythmic flow staining his golden fur. He tries to charge again, but the fire in his lungs is dimming. He stops, swaying, his trunk hanging low, sniffing the ground in confusion. He coughs, a wet, rattling sound that signals the end is near. The overkill debate often paints these hunters as wasteful slaughterers, but watching this, we sense a profound gravity. This was not a sport. This was a terrifying necessity. The calories in this single animal will sustain the entire band for months, providing meat for drying, fat for fuel, bone for tools, and hide for shelter. It is a transfer of energy from one giant to a collective of smaller ones. The hunters move in again, but slowly this time. They check their weapons, they reload. They do not want the animal to suffer for days, nor do they want to risk a zombie charge, a final burst of dying energy. They must deliver the coup de grace, the huntmaster signals. A single hunter steps forward, closing the distance to a daring 10 yards. The bull lifts his head, his eyes glazing, but he lacks the strength to lift his trunk. The hunter throws. The dart flies true, striking the neck, severing the major arteries. The great legs buckle. The collapse is slow, almost majestic, like a building coming down in slow motion. The knees hit the dirt, followed by the massive flank. The earth shudders one last time, accepting the weight. A silence returns to the valley, heavier than before. The rest of the herd has fled, their rumble fading into the distance. The dust settles, coating the sweat-streaked bodies of the hunters. They approach the fallen giant with a mixture of elation and reverence. There is no cheering, no high-fiving. There is a somber respect. They touch the animal, feeling the fading warmth of the massive body. One hunter places a hand on the curved ivory tusk, a connection between the living and the dead. This moment is preserved in the archaeological record. At sites like the Lenner Ranch, we find points that were resharpened and reused, but also points made of exotic, beautiful crystal quartz left behind in the carcass. Were they lost? Or were they left as an offering, a trade, a jewel of stone for a mountain of meat? The work is only beginning. The sun is dipping low, casting long, bruised shadows across the plain. A 10-ton carcass is a ticking clock. Soon, the scent of blood will drift on the wind, carrying a dinner bell to every predator within 10 miles. The dire wolves will come. The saber-tooths will come, and the most terrifying of them all, the short-faced bear, will come. The hunters must work fast. They signal for the rest of the clan, the women, the children, the elders, who have been waiting in safety. They emerge from the landscape carrying stone knives, scrapers, and baskets. It becomes a communal event. We watch as they begin the butchery. It is a scene of industrial efficiency. The thick hide is sliced open using razor-sharp flint flakes, tools that are struck from a core in seconds and discarded just as quickly when they dull. This is why we find so many flakes at kill sites. They are the disposable razor blades of the Paleolithic. They strip the meat in long sheets, laying it out on the clean grass. They crack the massive long bones to extract the rich, buttery marrow, a superfood that provides the essential fats needed to survive the cold nights. Nothing is wasted. The stomach is emptied and cleaned to be used as a water container. The sinews are harvested for thread. Even the ivory tusks are marked for future use. As twilight deepens, the scene transforms. Fires are lit around the carcass, creating a perimeter of light and smoke. The smell of roasting meat fills the air, a primal, savory scent that triggers a deep ancestral hunger in us. For the first time in weeks, the clan is safe. They have abundance. The children play with the discarded tail of the mammoth, chasing each other in the firelight. The elders sit on bison robes, recounting the story of the hunt, turning the chaos of the afternoon into the structured narrative of a legend. The hunters, clean now, sit quietly, repairing their damaged darts, their eyes scanning the darkness beyond the firelight. They know the night has eyes. This is the peak of the Clovis existence. In this moment, fed and warm, masters of the technology that felled a giant, they are the undisputed kings of the continent. But the darkness is deep, and the firelight only reaches so far. We can hear the snapping of twigs in the distance. The scavengers are gathering. The truce of the daylight is over. The golden age is a constant negotiation with the wild, and tonight the rent is due. We draw closer to the fire, seeking the comfort of the flames, as the first pair of glowing green eyes appears in the gloom, blinking slowly, assessing the strength of the hairless apes who dare to eat the king's share. The fire is the only island of safety in a sea of encroaching darkness. As the sun vanishes completely beneath the horizon, the temperature plummets, a reminder that the ice age is never far away. But tonight, the cold is held at bay by the roaring bonfires, fueled by dried sagebrush and precious driftwood. The air is thick, almost greasy, with the scent of roasting mammoth. It is a smell that hits the back of the throat, rich, iron-heavy, and overwhelmingly savory. To a people who have spent weeks rationing dried jerky and bitter roots, this is not just a meal, it is a religious experience. The sizzling of fat dripping onto the coals sounds like applause. We watch the clan in a moment of rare, unguarded humanity. The tension of the hunt has dissolved into a frantic, joyful consumption. There are no plates, no tables. A young woman uses a flint flake to slice a steaming strip of flank steak, passing it to an elder who has lost most of his teeth. He sucks on the meat, savoring the juice that he could not chew. Children, their faces smeared with grease and soot, gnaw on ribs as big as their own arms, their eyes wide with the biological ecstasy of a full belly. There is laughter, a sound that feels startlingly modern. Someone tells a joke, perhaps mocking the way the huntmaster tripped over a root earlier, and the group erupts into giggles. It is a scene that could be happening at a backyard barbecue in the 21st century, stripped of the patio furniture and the polyester. The fundamental joy of sharing food with family is a constant across time. But the party has an uninvited guest. The shift in atmosphere is subtle at first, like a drop in barometric pressure. The dogs, primitive wolf-like canines that live on the periphery of the camp, stop begging for scraps. Their hackles rise, creating ridges of fur along their spines. They emit low, vibrating growls, backing away from the darkness, tails tucked between their legs. The laughter dies out, replaced by a sudden, sharp silence. The huntmaster stands up, his hand instinctively going to the fresh dart he has just finished fletching. He kicks dirt onto the smaller fires to dim the glare, preserving their night vision. He hisses a command. and the mothers immediately pull the children into the center of the circle, behind the wall of armed men. From the blackness beyond the flickering light, a shape detaches itself from the night. It is massive, a towering silhouette that blocks out the stars. It is the giant, short-faced bear, Arctodus simus. If the mammoth is the king of the herbivores, this creature is the god of the carnivores. It is nothing like the modern grizzly or polar bear. It is built for speed, with long, lanky legs that give it a terrifyingly tall, gaunt appearance. On all fours, it stands nearly 6 feet at the shoulder, eye level with a tall man. When it rises, which it does now, slowly and with an awful fluid grace, it towers to 12 feet. It is a wall of fur and muscle, weighing over a ton. Its snout is short and broad, designed for crushing bone, and its sense of smell is so acute it likely smelled the blood from 5 miles away. This is the nightmare of the Pleistocene. We freeze, caught in the standoff. The bear is not charging. It is assessing. It is an arrogant predator. It is accustomed to being the largest thing in the world. It has likely driven saber-toothed cats off their kills just by showing up. It sees the puny, hairless apes, the fire, the dead mammoth. It does not fear them. It wants their prize. This is the phenomenon of kleptoparasitism, stealing food rather than hunting it, and Arctodus is the master of it. The bear takes a step forward and the ground vibrates. It huffs, a sound like a steam engine venting pressure. The Clovis people are terrified, but they are not helpless. This is the moment where their social cohesion becomes a weapon. If one man ran, he would be eaten. If they all run, they lose the meat and likely the slow-moving elders. So, they stand. It is a gamble of posturing. The men step forward in a line, shouting in unison, a guttural rhythmic chant designed to sound like a single massive organism. They wave torches, sending arcs of sparks into the night air. Fire is the one thing the giant beasts do not understand. It bites without teeth. The bear hesitates. It swats at a spark, confused. Historians and paleontologists still argue about the relationship between humans and these mega-predators. The overkill hypothesis usually focuses on herbivores. But did humans also hunt the predators? It is unlikely they hunted the short-faced bear for food, too dangerous, the meat too risky, but they certainly competed with it. Some suggest that the extinction of the megafauna was a double blow to Arctodus. Humans ate its prey and stole its kills. Tonight, however, the balance of power is precarious. The bear drops to all fours and makes a bluff charge, a sudden, explosive burst of speed that stops 10 feet from the fire. The speed is shocking. This animal can hit 40 miles per hour, faster than a racehorse. The wind of its movement fans the flames. The smell of the bear, musky, rotten, and wild, washes over the clan. A young hunter, perhaps the one who threw the kill shot earlier, loses his nerve. He flinches, stepping back. The bear sees the weakness. It lunges, snapping its jaws, a sound like a bear trap closing. But the huntmaster is there. He does not throw his spear. That would leave him unarmed. Instead, he thrusts a burning brand of sagebrush directly into the bear's face. The resinous leaves explode in a flash of heat and light. The bear roars, a sound that rattles the marrow in our bones, and recoils, shaking its massive head. It is not injured, but it is annoyed. The cost of the fight has just gone up. Is this meat worth a burned nose? Is it worth a fight with 20 stinging insects? The bear decides. It snorts, turning sideways to show its sheer size, a final act of intimidation. Then, with a disdainful grunt, it grabs a massive chunk of mammoth leg that had been dragged to the edge of the light, roughly 80 pounds of meat and bone, and effortlessly carries it away into the dark. It is a tax. The humans let it go. They do not chase. They breathe. The adrenaline crash is almost physical, leaving their knees weak. The mothers hold their children tighter. The dogs creep back to the fire, whimpering. They have survived the audit of the night. This encounter highlights a critical, often overlooked aspect of the Clovis existence, the constant state of vulnerability. We often picture them as conquerors, marching across the continent, but they were also refugees in a land of monsters. Every kill was a dinner bell for something bigger. Every night was a siege. This pressure forced them to be hyper-vigilant, hyper-cooperative. There was no room for internal squabbling when a 1-ton sprinting bear was waiting in the shadows. It forged a culture of intense loyalty and shared responsibility. The feast continues, but the mood has changed. The laughter is gone, replaced by a quiet, serious efficiency. They work faster now, stripping the meat and hanging it on drying racks high above the ground, trying to process as much as possible before other scavengers arrive. The coyotes are yipping in the distance now, emboldened by the bear's departure. The saber-toothed cats, the Smilodon, are likely out there too, silent and stalking, waiting for the fires to die down. The Golden Age is not just about the glory of the kill, it is about the terror of the keep. As the night deepens, the clan establishes a watch rotation. We sit with the sentry, a woman wrapped in a thick bison robe, her back against a rock, a spear across her lap. Her eyes scan the perimeter, reading the shades of black and gray. She listens to the wind, filtering out the harmless rustle of grass from the dangerous snap of a twig. She is tired. Her muscles ache from the butchery, but she is awake. She looks up at the stars, the same stars we see, but sharper, burning with a fierce intensity in the cold, dry air. She wonders, perhaps, if the spirits of the ancestors are watching. She wonders if the winter will be hard. We drift closer to her, sharing her vigil. We can see the worry etched in the lines around her eyes. This is the human cost of the Clovis expansion. It was a life of extreme highs and terrifying lows. They were the greatest hunters the continent had ever seen, yet they slept with one eye open. The myth of the noble savage often paints a picture of effortless harmony with nature, but the reality was a gritty, exhausted struggle for dominance. They were fighting for their place at the top of the pyramid, and tonight they held their ground. But the bear is still out there. And tomorrow, the sun will rise on a world that is one day closer to changing forever. We leave her to her watch, the fire popping and hissing beside her, and we drift upward, away from the kill site, following the smoke as it rises into the atmosphere, carrying the story of the feast into the ether. We are moving toward a different kind of site now, away from the blood and the noise, to a place of silence and secrets, where the Clovis people buried not their dead, but their treasures. We leave the blood-stained grass of the kill site and the anxious vigilance of the camp, traveling many miles and months away from the clamor of the feast. The landscape changes. We are no longer on the open, exposed steppe, but in a place of quiet geological power, perhaps the rim of a canyon or the convergence of two rivers, a spot that feels permanent in a shifting world. The wind here is different. It does not carry the scent of prey, but the dry, ancient smell of sage and eroding sandstone. We are here to witness a ritual that is far more secretive and enigmatic than the hunt. We are watching the creation of a Clovis cache. In the soft, gray light of pre-dawn, a small group of 3 men climbs a ridge. They carry heavy bundles wrapped in leather. They do not speak. This is not a task for words, it is a task for memory. They stop at a specific location, triangulating their position with the peaks on the horizon, a mental GPS marking a spot they intend to find again. Or perhaps a spot they intend never to find again. They kneel and begin to dig. They are not digging a grave for a body, but a vault for a legacy. As the pit deepens, cutting through the topsoil into the cool red clay beneath, the bundles are unwrapped. What is revealed is breathtaking. These are not the utilitarian tools of the butchery site. These are the crown jewels of the Stone Age. We see massive bifaces, large leaf-shaped cores of stone that have been roughly shaped but not finished. They are blanks, the potential for hundreds of future tools stored in a single heavy object. But there are also finished points, and they are spectacular. Some are made of obsidian, black as midnight and sharp as a molecular edge. Others are made of tiger chert, striped with amber and gold. Still others are made of translucent quartz that glows in the low light. This is the Simon cache, or the Fen cache, coming to life before our eyes. The sheer value of this hoard is staggering. To a Clovis person, this stone is not just money, It is life. It represents months of travel to distant quarries, weeks of skilled labor, and the potential for survival for years to come. Why would they bury it? This is the question that haunts archaeologists. We watch as the men arrange the stones in the pit with painstaking care. They stack them like dinner plates, creating a spiral pattern. It feels ceremonial. If this were merely a storage locker, an insurance policy against a bad winter or a lost quarry, why the artistry? Why the reverence? Then comes the final, most telling step. One of the men produces a pouch made of bladder skin. He opens it, and a fine crimson dust spills out. It is red ochre, hematite iron oxide that has been ground into a powder. It is the color of blood, of fire, of the sunrise. In cultures across the globe and across time, red ochre is the symbol of life and transition. He sprinkles the dust over the stones, coating the gray and black tools in a layer of vibrant red. It looks disturbingly and beautifully like a blood sacrifice without the violence. The stones are being fed. They are being consecrated. This action splits the scholarly community down the middle. The pragmatists argue that this is simply a survival strategy. Stone is heavy. If you are a nomad moving a family across a continent, you cannot carry 300 pounds of rocks. You bury them at a known landmark, intending to return next season to resupply. The ochre might just be a preservative or a marker. But the ritualists point to the craftsmanship. Some of the points found in these caches, like the ones from the root site, are over 9 inches long. They are too big to be thrown. They would snap. They are too heavy to be practical. They are hyper-artifacts, exaggerated versions of reality, like a ceremonial sword. Burying them is an act of potlatch, a display of wealth so immense you can afford to give it to the earth. Perhaps it is both. In the Clovis mind, the practical and the spiritual were likely not separate categories. A tool was a spirit. A cache was a prayer. We watch as they begin to fill the hole. The red-dusted stones disappear beneath the dirt. The men tamp the earth down, smoothing the surface until it blends perfectly with the surrounding scrub. They scatter pine needles and loose rocks over the site. They are erasing their tracks. The cache is invisible. It is a secret shared only between the men and the land. There is a profound sense of trust in this act. They are banking on the future. They are assuming that they will survive the winter, that they will return, that the world will still be here. Or, if this is an offering, they are trusting that the forces that govern the elk and the storm will recognize this gift and grant them favor. It is a moment of vulnerability. They are leaving their best technology behind, walking away empty-handed, armed only with their knowledge. As they descend the ridge, the sun finally breaches the horizon, illuminating the landscape. We stay behind, looking at the patch of undisturbed earth. We know what they do not. In many cases, they will never return. The Simon Cache in Idaho, the Fenn Cache in Wyoming, the Mojave Cache in Colorado, they were all found by modern machinery or erosion thousands of years later, still packed, still waiting. Did the owners die? Did the landscape change so much they lost the spot? Or was the act of burying it the entire point, a permanent gift to the earth that sustained them? We can sense the ghosts of their intentions lingering here. The silence of the cache is different from the silence of the empty plain. It is a pregnant silence holding a story that was interrupted. It reminds us that archaeology is largely the study of things people lost or left behind. These caches are time capsules, messages in a bottle thrown into the ocean of soil. They tell us that the Clovis people were not just surviving day to day, they were planning, thinking ahead, and engaging in complex symbolic behavior. They had a concept of the future. The wind picks up, blowing dust across the hidden hoard. The red ochre, safe underground, clings to the stone, staining it for eternity. When we dig these up today, the ochre is still there, staining the gloves of the archaeologists, a direct chemical link to that morning on the ridge. It is the blood of the Clovis culture, preserving their intent. But not all burials were of stone. As we drift away from the high ridge and the secret cache, the emotional tone shifts from reverence to grief. We are moving toward a different kind of site, one that is not about the future of tools, but the end of a lineage. The We are moving toward Montana to a rock shelter shielded by a sandstone cliff. The sun is setting now, casting long, melancholy shadows. We are about to witness the only known physical remains of a Clovis person. We are moving from the treasures of the earth to the treasures of the heart. The silence here is not one of secrecy, but of sorrow. We drift north now, guided by the spine of the Rocky Mountains, until the red deserts give way to the rugged, sage-covered hills of western Montana. We are approaching the Shields River Valley, a place of stark, breathtaking beauty where the mountains rise like jagged teeth against a sky of endless gray. It is here, in the shadow of a limestone cliff, that the story of the Clovis people ceases to be about hunting and survival and becomes deeply, painfully personal. We are standing outside a small rock shelter, a natural alcove protected from the wind. It is 12,600 years ago. The air is cold, biting at the skin, but inside the shelter, the atmosphere is heavy with a different kind of chill, the stillness of loss. We are attending a funeral. In the center of the small space, illuminated by the soft, wavering light of a tallow lamp, lies the body of a child. He is a boy, no more than 2 years old, a toddler who had likely just learned to walk, whose laughter had briefly lightened the heavy burden of the Ice Age winter. We do not know his name, but to science he will become known as Anzac One. To his family, he is the center of a universe that has just shattered. The grief in this small cave is a physical weight. We see a mother, her face streaked with ash and tears, rocking back and forth in a rhythm as old as humanity. We see a father, the broad-shouldered hunter we might have admired on the mammoth steppe, now slumped and broken, his strength useless against the invisible enemy of sickness or accident that took his son. The ritual we witness is elaborate, desperate, and filled with love. Just as they did with the stone cache, they have brought the red ochre. They cover the small, still form in the crimson powder, staining his skin, his hair, and the furs he's wrapped in. The red dust fills the air, settling on the cave floor like a bloody mist. It is the color of vitality, a final attempt to wrap the child in the warmth of life as he enters the cold dark. But they do not stop there. They surround the boy with wealth. This is not a pauper's grave, it is a king's ransom. We watch as they place the artifacts around him. There are over 125 items in total. There are Clovis points, fluted and sharp, made of the finest chert. There are massive bifaces chipped from stone that was carried from quarries hundreds of miles away. But most intriguing are the elk antler foreshafts, the bone rods. These are rare, valuable, and incredibly difficult to make. They are the high-tech components of their hunting gear. To bury them is to bury the means of survival. It is a sacrifice of staggering proportions. The family is essentially burying their bank account, their tools, and their future alongside this child. As they place the tools, we notice something heartbreaking. They are breaking them. The father takes a beautiful, perfect stone point and snaps it in half before placing it next to the boy. The antler rods are broken into segments. Archaeologists have debated this practice for decades. Was it ritual killing of the objects? The idea is that by breaking the tool, you release its spirit, allowing it to travel with the child into the afterlife. A broken tool for a broken life. Or was it a practical measure to prevent grave robbers, perhaps members of a rival clan, from stealing the goods? The tenderness with which the pieces are placed suggests the former. They are equipping him. They are giving him the tools he will need to hunt in the lands of the ancestors. They are terrified that he will be lonely or unprepared, so they send him off with the very best they have. It is a parenting instinct that transcends time. Take your coat. Take your money. Be safe. This burial changes everything we thought we knew about the Clovis warrior culture. We often picture them as stoic, hard-bitten survivors who left the weak behind. But you do not bury a toddler with a treasury of artifacts if you view them as a burden. You do this if you view them as a person, a soul, a beloved member of the tribe. It speaks of a society that valued its children immensely, a culture with deep emotional currents and a belief in something beyond the material world. The Anzac boy was not a hunter. He had never thrown a spear. He earned this burial not through what he did, but simply through who he was. But the story of Anzac I does not end in the cave. It leaps forward across 12 millennia to a laboratory in the 21st century. In 2014, scientists successfully sequenced the genome of this small child, extracting DNA from a fragment of his skull. The results were a bombshell that rewrote history. For years, fringe theories had suggested that the Clovis people might have come from Europe, crossing the Atlantic ice shelf, the Solutrean hypothesis. Anzac I silenced those whispers. His DNA is unmistakably Asian in origin, confirming the migration across the Bering Land Bridge. But the revelation went deeper. When they compared his genetic code to modern populations, they found a match that sent shockwaves through the scientific community. The Anzac boy is closely related to the vast majority of living Native Americans. He is a direct ancestor to roughly 80% of the indigenous people of North, Central, and South America. The Mayan builders of the temples, the Amazonian tribes of the rainforest, the Navajo of the desert, the Mapuche of Chile, they all carry a genetic thread that leads back to this rock shelter in Montana. He is the grandfather, the genetic bridge between the ancient wanderers of the Ice Age and the vibrant civilizations that would follow. We look back at the grieving family in the cave. They believe they are saying goodbye forever. They do not know, cannot possibly know, that their son will become the most famous child in prehistory. They do not know that his legacy is not death, but life on a continental scale. In his DNA, he carries the blueprint for millions of future lives. The tears they shed fall onto the dust that will one day prove to the world that their people were the first peoples, the true pioneers of the Western Hemisphere. The burial is complete. They cover the body with rock slabs to protect it from the scavengers, the bears and wolves we met earlier. They step back, their hands stained red with ochre. The father lingers for a moment, touching the cold stone, whispering a final word that the wind steals away. Then they turn and leave. They walk out of the shelter and into the twilight, leaving the boy to his long sleep. They must keep moving. The herd is moving. The season is turning. Life for the Clovis is a river that cannot stop flowing, even for grief. As we hover in the mouth of the cave, watching the family disappear into the gloom, we feel the weight of the ages. The silence returns, claiming the space. The tallow lamp flickers and dies, plunging the shelter into darkness. But it is not an empty darkness. It is a darkness filled with the potential of what is to come. We are standing at the genetic crossroads of the Americas. The golden age of the Clovis is peaking, but the world outside is beginning to shudder. The stable climate that allowed them to thrive is about to fracture. The great ice sheets, which have been retreating, are about to play a cruel trick. We float upwards, leaving the Anzac site, rising high above the Montana mountains. The air's growing colder again. The wind is shifting from the south to the north. Below us, the landscape looks peaceful, but the geological clock is ticking toward midnight. The glaciers are melting, feeding a massive inland sea called Lake Agassiz. The dam holding back that water is weakening. We are about to witness the catastrophe that will bring the curtain down on the Clovis world. The morning is over. The survival of the species is about to be tested as never before. The boy sleeps, but the world is waking up to a nightmare of ice and drought. We hover now in the thin, frigid air of the stratosphere, looking down upon a continent that appears deceptively peaceful. It is roughly 12,800 years ago. The great ice sheets, the Laurentide and the Cordilleran, have been slowly retreating for thousands of years, pulling back like a receding tide to reveal the scarred earth beneath. In their wake, they have left a colossal legacy, Lake Agassiz. This is not a lake in the way we understand it today. It is an inland sea of meltwater, larger than all the modern Great Lakes combined, a vast, shivering expanse of fresh water held in place by a precarious dam of ice and sediment in what is now central Canada. It is a loaded gun pointed at the head of the global climate system. For centuries, the Clovis people have lived in a warming world. They have known the spring thaws, the blooming of the steppe, and the reliable migration of the herds. They have likely told stories about the long winter of their ancestors, dismissing them as myths of a bygone era. But the earth is temperamental, and physics does not care about human comfort. We watch, helpless, as the tipping point arrives. Perhaps it starts with a groan deep within the ice, a fracture spreading like a spiderweb through the glacial dam. Or perhaps it is sudden, a catastrophic collapse that sounds like the sky itself is tearing apart. The dam breaks. The result is a hydrological apocalypse. A torrent of fresh water, estimated to be equivalent to the flow of the Amazon River multiplied by 100, roars out of Lake Agassiz. It does not flow south into the Mississippi. It blasts north and east, surging into the North Atlantic Ocean. This is not just a flood, it is a climate switch. This massive pulse of fresh water slams into the salty, dense currents of the Atlantic, specifically the Atlantic Meridional Overturning Circulation, AMOC, the conveyor belt that brings warm tropical water north and keeps the northern hemisphere temperate. The fresh water dilutes the salt, making the water too light to sink. The conveyor belt jams, the heater turns off. In a matter of decades, a blink of an eye in geological time, the world plunges back into the icebox. This is the Younger Dryas event. Temperatures in the northern hemisphere plummet by as much as 10 to 15 degrees Celsius. The glaciers stop retreating and begin to advance again, grinding over the forests that had just begun to grow. The golden age of the Clovis hits a wall of ice. Imagine the confusion of a people who have spent generations mastering a specific environment, only to wake up one morning to find that summer has been canceled for the next 1,000 years. It is the ultimate cosmic rug pull. On the ground, the impact is devastating. We return to the steppe, but the golden grass is gone. The air is dry, stinging with wind-blown dust. The lush, mammoth-supporting ecosystem is collapsing. The great beasts are the first to feel the squeeze. The Columbian mammoths, those titans of the plains, are starving. They need hundreds of pounds of high-calorie vegetation every day, but the cold and the drought have turned the salad bar into a dust bowl. Their range is shrinking. The waterholes are drying up. The herds are fragmented, wandering like ghosts in a landscape that can no longer support their hunger. This brings us to the dark heart of the extinction debate. For decades, scientists have argued over who killed the megafauna. Was it the Clovis spear, or was it the Younger Dryas cold? The overkill hypothesis paints humans as a plague, wiping out 35 genera of megafauna, horses, camels, ground sloths, mammoths, in a bloodthirsty rampage. The climate hypothesis argues that the weather did the dirty work and humans just watched it happen. But standing here, in the freezing wind of the Younger Dryas, we can see the tragic synergy. It was likely a 1-2 punch. The climate stressed the populations to the breaking point, reducing their numbers and slowing their reproduction. And then, the humans, desperate, hungry, and armed with the deadliest technology on the planet, delivered the knockout blow. A starving mammoth is easier to kill. A herd trapped around a shrinking waterhole is a sitting duck. The Clovis people were not villains. They were parents trying to feed their children in a dying world. They killed the last of the giants not out of malice, but out of necessity. We witness the slow, heartbreaking fade. We see a solitary mammoth, ribs showing through its shaggy coat, standing alone on a ridge, calling out for a herd that no longer answers. The silence that follows is absolute. The ground no longer shakes. The thunder has left the earth. This era is marked in the archaeological record by something called the black mat, a dark layer of carbon-rich soil found at over 50 sites across North America. It represents the decay of the lush landscape, the charcoal from widespread wildfires, and perhaps the algae blooms in the drying pools where the last animals died. Below this mat, we find Clovis points and mammoth bones. Above it, we find nothing. No mammoths, no Clovis points. The slate has been wiped clean. The cultural crisis for the Clovis people is existential. Their entire society was built around the big kill. Their technology, their social structure, their rituals, everything was calibrated for a world of giants. The beautiful fluted Clovis point was an armor-piercing round designed for thick hide and massive bone. You do not need a 5-inch fluted point to kill a rabbit. You do not need a coordinated hunting party of 20 men to catch a deer. As the megafauna vanished, the Clovis technology became obsolete. The Golden Age became a liability. We watch the painful process of adaptation. It is not a movie-style disaster where everyone dies at once. It is a slow, grinding transition. We see a band of hunters sitting by a small, smoky fire. They are hungry. They have not seen a mammoth in a generation. The stories of the mountain walkers are becoming myths told by the elders with tears in their eyes. The young men look at the beautiful heavy stone points in their hands, points that took hours to make, points designed for a glory that no longer exists, and they make a choice. They strike the stone, they make it smaller, they abandon the flute, they create a new point, simpler, easier to make, designed for the faster, smaller bison that are surviving the cold. The Clovis culture is dissolving. It is not that the people are dying out. Their DNA proves they survived. It is that the idea of Clovis is dying. The rigid, unified tradition that spanned a continent is shattering into regional fragments. In the east, they become the makers of the Cumberland Point. In the plains, they evolve into the Folsom culture, masters of the bison hunt, crafting points that are even more delicate and exquisite than Clovis, but smaller, faster, different. The empire of the flute is over. There is a deep melancholy in this transition. We often view progress as a straight line up, but history is full of dead ends and lost arts. The knowledge of how to hunt a mammoth, how to orchestrate a kill of that magnitude, how to knap a 9-inch ceremonial blade, it is all being forgotten. It is slipping away night by night as the old masters die and the new generation turns its attention to the deer and the root. The black mat covers the past, sealing it away. Yet, amidst the loss, there is resilience. The human capacity to endure is the true hero of this story. The younger Dryas tried to freeze them out. The extinction of their primary food source tried to starve them out. But they refused to fade. They wrapped their furs tighter. They expanded their diet, learning to eat turtles, fish, roots, and seeds. They became generalists. They became survivors. The grand cinematic Golden Age is gone, replaced by a grittier, harder reality. As the 1,500-year winter drags on, the landscape changes permanently. The forests shift, the deserts grow. The Americas are taking on the shape we would recognize today. The ghosts of the megafauna linger only in the oral traditions, stories of monster bears and stiff-legged giant elks that will be whispered around campfires for 10,000 years, eventually becoming the legends recorded by the first anthropologists. But the physical reality is gone. We drift away from the frozen, silent plains, moving toward the final chapter of our journey. The ice is beginning to melt again. The younger Dryas is ending as abruptly as it began, the climate snapping back into warmth. But the world that emerges from the deep freeze is a new world. The giants are gone. The Clovis points are buried. A new day is breaking, and the children of the Anzac boy are stepping out of the shadows to claim it. We are moving toward the legacy, the echo that rings through time to the present day. We are moving to see what remains when the ice finally recedes. The great wheel of the climate turns once more, and the 1,500-year winter of the younger Dryas shudders to a halt. The warming is rapid, a geological fever break that sends the glaciers retreating north for the final time, back to the poles where they belong. The world that emerges is unrecognizable from the one the first Clovis pioneers stepped into. The mammoth steppe, that endless ribbon of gold, is gone, replaced by the mosaic of forests, deserts, and prairies that define the modern Americas. The giants have vanished into the earth, leaving behind only their massive bones to confuse future generations of farmers and scientists. The golden age of the Clovis, that brief shining moment of unified technology and megafauna hunting, is over. But to say the Clovis people ended is the greatest misconception of American prehistory. They did not disappear. They simply changed their clothes. We watch the cultural fragmentation happen in real time, like a pane of glass shattering into 1,000 unique, sharp shards. As the environment diversified, so did the people. The single, monolithic Clovis identity, which had stretched from coast to coast, dissolved into a vibrant tapestry of regional cultures. On the Great Plains, where the bison still thundered, the descendants of the Clovis became the Folsom people. If the Clovis point was a broadsword, the Folsom point was a scalpel. We see a Folsom napper at work, and the skill required is terrifyingly high. They take the fluting technique invented by their grandfathers and push it to the absolute limit of physics, creating a channel flake that runs the entire length of the point, leaving a shell of stone so thin it is translucent. It is the Baroque period of flint napping. Art for art's sake, a display of mastery that says, "We are still the lords of the stone." In the woodlands of the East, the Dalton culture emerges, adapting to a life of hunting deer and gathering nuts in the dense canopy. In the Great Basin, the Western stem tradition takes hold, mastering the art of survival in the drying wetlands. The Clovis label fades from the archaeological record, not because the people failed, but because they succeeded too well. They stopped being a single roving band of explorers and became the distinct nations of the land. They stopped discovering the Americas and started inhabiting them. They learned the specific rhythms of the Ohio River, the Sonoran Desert, and the Amazon Basin. They put down roots. This continuity is the most powerful truth we have uncovered. For a long time, historians and archaeologists argued over the Solutrean hypothesis, a romantic but controversial idea that the first Americans might have paddled across the Atlantic from Ice Age Europe based on superficial similarities between Clovis tools and French Solutrean tools. It was a theory that sparked endless debates and fueled the imagination. But the silent testimony of DNA has largely laid that debate to rest. The genetic threads we traced from the Anzac Boy in Montana bind the Clovis people inextricably to Northeast Asia and Beringia. They are the first peoples in the truest sense. When you look at the face of a Maya king carved in stone, or the portrait of a Lakota chief from the 19th century, you are looking at the great-great-grandchildren of the mammoth hunters. The bloodline is unbroken. The resilience is inherited. As we pull back further, widening our view to encompass the entire hemisphere, we see the legacy of the Clovis Golden Age not as a tragedy of extinction, but as a foundation myth. They were the ones who broke the trail. They named the mountains, though we have lost those names. They found the passes. They identified the sacred springs. They transformed a terrifying alien landscape into a home. They were the first to look at the Grand Canyon, the first to hear the roar of Niagara Falls, the first to walk the beaches of the Gulf of Mexico. Every step we take on this continent today is a step onto ground they consecrated with their courage. The mystery of the Clovis is largely a modern invention, born of our desire for drama. We want them to be Atlanteans or aliens or lost tribes, but the reality is far more poignant. They were just people. They were parents who worried about their sick children. They were craftsmen who took pride in a job well done. They were teenagers who made bad decisions and elders who told the same stories too many times. They laughed, they grieved, and they feared the dark, just like us. Their technology, the famous Clovis point, was not a magic wand. It was a tool born of desperation and genius, a solution to a specific problem that no longer exists. Its disappearance is not a failure. It is a sign of adaptation. You don't keep carrying a bear spear when there are no more bears. You make a bow and arrow. You move on. We are left with the silence of the land. The wind blows over the Blackwater Draw in New Mexico, over the Galt site in Texas, over the submerged beaches of the Pacific coast. The artifacts are there, sleeping beneath the cornfields in the parking lots, waiting to be found. A farmer plowing his field in Iowa might hear a clink and reach down to pick up a stone that hasn't seen the sun in 13,000 years. In his hand, he holds a connection to a deep time that defies comprehension. He holds a moment where a human being stood on the edge of a glacier and decided to keep walking south. The story of the Clovis is the story of the human spirit. It is the story of facing the impossible, a wall of ice, a field of monsters, a climate collapse, and finding a way to endure. It reminds us that we are the descendants of survivors. We come from a long line of people who did not give up when the fire went out. We carry that same spark within us. The Golden Age was not a time of ease. It was a time of forge and fire that tempered the human soul for the challenges of the Holocene. And so, we let the curtain fall on the Pleistocene. The great stage is empty of giants. The actors have changed costumes. The script has moved from survival to civilization. But the echo of that first footfall, that soft crunch of a mukluk on virgin snow, still resonates in the quiet places of the world. The Clovis people have walked into the mist of history, but they did not leave. They are the earth under our feet. They are the blood in the veins of the continent. They are the beginning. The fire has burned down to embers now, a soft bed of glowing orange pulsing in the dark. The wind outside has settled, leaving the world in a deep velvet silence. The great mammoths are asleep in the earth, and the hunters have laid down their spears. The story is finished, folded away like a warm blanket. You have walked across the ice, sailed the kelp highway, and stood before the fire of the first pioneers. You have seen the courage it took to face the dark, and you have seen that the dawn always comes. There is nothing left to solve, nothing left to chase. The history is safe, it has happened, and it rests peacefully. You are safe here, in the quiet of your own time, held by the same earth that held them. Let the weight of the years drift off your shoulders. Let the breathing of the night match your own. Deep, slow, and steady. The past is a lullaby, and you are drifting on its current. Would you like me to curate a similar journey into the mysterious sea peoples of the Bronze Age collapse, or perhaps a quiet walk through the construction of the Great Pyramids? Sweet dreams.